It's great to be here. Jos, thank you for the invitation. I will be your moderator today. I'm honored to have been asked to do so. And we will start straight away inviting you, Valerie Labi, on stage with your bike and with your helmet. Valerie traveled here all the way from Ghana, from Accra, actually. But you are already also in Lomé, in Lagos, in Lusaka. Yeah. So you are going to tell us the story of your amazing journey. So welcome on stage. This is your mic.
Thank you
and
very
you can
much.
move around as you like.
Okay, wonderful. And I guess this is my clicker. Wahoo! 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 Okay, thank you so much. It is a real honor to have the opportunity to present today. So my name is Valerie Abena Konyo Labi Gundu Saptana the First, aka Mrs. Dagadu. So you can tell by the fact that I have such a long name that I have been on a long journey. And it's this journey that I'm going to share with you today around building Wahoo. I'm just going to share with you a series of photographs that I'm hoping will give you a bit of an insight into my community, but also the ecosystem that we're trying to build. Has anyone here been to Ghana before? Has anyone been anywhere in Africa before? Okay, that's great. Can we get a Wahoo? Wahoo, brilliant. So I started with this picture. And this picture I like to call an ecosystem of believers. And so Ghana is known for two things. Firstly, we are known for producing great statesmen and women. So from Kwame Nkrumah to Kofi Annan. And secondly, we have the best football team in the world. Can I get a Wahoo? Okay. And so with like any team, Wahoo needs an ecosystem of believers. And this photograph is a picture of the Black Star supporters at the World Cup. And this last few days for me, meeting many of you has represented me finding an ecosystem of believers. Because I think the thing that we all have in common is that we believe that e-cargo bikes will change the world. And that's really the starting point for us at Wahoo. I kind of fell into the space and the world of e-mobility. I am, I would say, an economist by training, but I like social enterprises. So I lived 6 years in the most northern part of Ghana, where I used to sell toilets. In another social enterprise, but I like businesses that everybody does. So everybody moves and everybody goes to the toilet. So that was really my starting point for business. And how could we use as a business as a tool for good? How could you create businesses where we're building the business with a lens of social, environmental and economic capital? Most people look at just the economics. But if you're looking at building resilient businesses in Africa, you have to use the three lenses. So this photo I've shared with you was really a motivator for, if I know many of you haven't been to Africa, but in many rural and urban communities, this scene of a woman carrying a heavy load from A to B on her head is pretty typical. And this was really the starting point for me. How could I change this? Imagine how detrimental this is to our national productivity. Imagine how harmful this is to communities in the areas where we don't have last mile delivery services. This is the reality for a lot of people. But when you look at the transition that was happening, when the pandemic hit, we saw the Western world turn to Amazons. But in Africa, we also started to see e-commerce companies like Jumia, like Bolt, start to look at last mile connectivity from a digital platform perspective. But what we were also starting to see is, in order to fulfill this transition to e-commerce, we were getting more petrol bikes on the road. Can anyone guess how old the average vehicle on the road in Ghana is? How old? Anyone guess? 20 years? Close? Not that old, but close. 15? Very close. Any more guesses? 18? Okay, 14. So the average vehicle on the road in Ghana is about 14 years old. So now you have two choices. You have this choice. You have people who are carrying load on their head, walking from A to B, or you have a last mile delivery solution that's fulfilled by a 14-year-old combustion vehicle. And that's really my motivation for Wahoo and what we wanted to change. So this is our vision. Can I get a Wahoo? A Wahoo! Yes, so essentially, Wahoo's vision is to transition Africa's last mile to sustainable fleets. And you can see in this picture, it's not sustainable fleets for just men, but sustainable fleets for both men and women. And I'll come on a little bit into the different kind of use cases we're seeing. So a recent study by the MasterCard Foundation said by 2030, there will be nearly 80 million delivery riders operating across Africa, okay? And the delivery riders are the heart of the e-commerce industry. But like Levi here, one of our riders, they are also the most disenfranchised. They're the heart of the industry, but the most disenfranchised. And by that, I mean someone like Levi, he doesn't have a bank account. He's unbanked. He's not visible in the financial services world. He doesn't have access to credit. He can't buy his own vehicle. He can't get insurance. And he's not productive. So he may be doing deliveries, but he doesn't have a consistent pipeline of deliveries. And then he's also not riding safely. Most delivery riders you see don't wear the right helmets. They're on unsafe vehicles. So this really for us was, okay, we want to make this transition to sustainable fleets, but how do we do that and where do we start? So for us, we started with the riders. So Wahoo, in order to be able to help delivery riders get access to electric vehicles and be able to affordably pay for them, we had to do a number of things. So that's why I say that we operate at the nexus of three core industries. So e-commerce, e-mobility, and fintech. The other thing that's been really interesting about this journey is around timing. A lot of people have focused on what is happening in Western markets with electric mobilities. But the timing of e-mobility adoption in African markets is really now. I think this is the window where you're going to see a leapfrog, like we saw with mobile phones, like we saw with mobile money. The next leapfrog on the continent is going to be in e-mobility. And I just put an illustration here. So you can see the petrol bike up here versus a Wahoo. Can I get a Wahoo? Thank you. So I just put here, just so you can have a bit of a comparison. If you are doing a day's worth of delivery on a petrol bike in Ghana, you're spending around $250 a month on petrol. This is before you've even bought the bike. This is no insurance. This is nothing. Just on petrol. If you are riding a Wahoo, you are spending $3.60 a month on charging. So just if you have that comparison, this now starts to bring home around how important the transition is. But the other thing also is fuel prices have increased 300% in African markets, Ghana, Nigeria. I don't know about Mali, but probably the same in the last 12 months. So now it is a necessity that people make this transition. It's not government-led. It's not being led by fancy vehicles being on the road. It is a necessity. But the biggest issue that we have is around how do we actually get vehicles that suit our roads and suit our needs and our infrastructure, and how do we connect them to the rider? And so this is really our solution at Wahoo. We have our Wahoo bike. Can I get a Wahoo? Yeah, a Wahoo bike. And it took us around 2 years to design this bike. And so you would see a number of the bikes. Initially, we started as a bicycle conversion company. So we were buying secondhand bicycles that were on the way to Burkina Faso and to Mali, and then adding an electric battery to them. And we realized that people liked the performance, but from a safety perspective, look and feel, aspirations, and then even things around the strength and durability. We had to go through a number of iterations to get to the bike that we've gone to market with now. And so there's a few things that's interesting about this bike. So it has 2 batteries on here, and you can take the batteries off and charge them at home like you would your phone or your laptop. So we also didn't want any complicated charging infrastructure. One of the principles of our Wahoo bike is you can charge anytime, anywhere. The other thing was around range. So you have a 140-kilometer range on this bike. So you can basically charge at night, come from home, do a whole day's delivery, and get back home without having to charge during the day. We had a longer seat. So you can see that it's a fat tire bike, but it's bigger than what you're seeing in Europe, partly just because of the durability of the roads, the size of riders. So all these things we had to take into account when we were actually designing the bike. It has both a pedal and a thumb throttle, so that you can ride it hybrid like a motorcycle or like an e-bike, just depending on what the use case is and where you are, rural and urban. The next thing to our solution was our bikes are connected to our Wahoo digital platform. So this is basically an app that all our riders have, which allows them to access an ecosystem of services and support. So the first thing for us has been a rider can buy this bike, so they ride to own or subscribe to own the bike for $30 a week equivalent, and they pay the subscription through the app. The second thing is we offer sustainable fleet solutions to the Bolts and the Ubers and the Glovos, which also now means the bike comes with a job. So we've now given a delivery rider a consistent pipeline of work. We've also given a broken down a way for them to pay for the vehicle. We, in addition to this, broker services through the app platform. So now we can do things like insurance, we can sell accessories and just general information. So one of the things we've realized is it's a new technology. So we always need to be releasing videos of information that we could use to train riders with. And they get all of that in the palm of their hand. And this is also now how we sell direct to rider. So you don't have to go through any complicated banking process. You can just download the app and then request to join an info session. And then that's your pipeline for distribution. The next thing has been around production. So one of the biggest challenges in our markets is there just aren't enough EVs. Like, I think it's wonderful for me when I come here and I see all the different brands, but there are probably more brands in this room than there is on the whole continent. So it's really crazy in terms of we don't have choice, we don't have local production. And so in Accra, we as Wahoo have set up what we call an EV zone. So it's just basically a warehouse, a factory space in the middle of Accra that we've built a kind of R&D team where we do the production of our bike, but we're also very open to partnerships. So at the moment, our focus is battery partnerships. If anyone's doing any interesting battery research, we're always excited to meet with you. Yay! Can I get a Wahoo? And so what we're trying to also be is a gateway for people who want to actually design for African markets to have like a landing base with Wahoo so that we can co-create, partner for not just the hardware, but also things like the information and building the community. The second interesting element about our solution is through the connectivity with our app platform, we now have created a digital footprint for that rider. So one of the things that we do in order to generate revenue is we actually track the telematic data of each rider. And we do two things. We create what we call a rider safety score. So we can actually create we give the rider a score out of 10 based on their riding behavior. And then we share that with the insurance companies so we can co-create insurance based on how they ride. The second thing that we do with the telematic data is we actually broker the carbon avoided through compliance market, and we have the off-taker in terms of in the form of the Swiss government. So that's actually become a revenue stream for us in terms of hard currency, which is allowing us to also reduce the cost of the bike overall, but also reward riders for positive behaviors around carbon emissions. This is our warehouse space, and one of our stars of our business called Farida, and she joined us from one of the universities. So we have a strong link with the universities in Accra, but what she does is on a bi-weekly basis, we have drop-in sessions for riders where we provide training. And these are trainings that we're now digitizing in our videos, but we also know there's certain elements that are just better done in person. And then finally, really for us, the focus of our whole ecosystem. Most people you're seeing have branded just the app. So that's why you have the Bolts and the Ubers. But we are very focused on creating a identifiable community. So if you come to Accra on the ground, you would see very clearly a Wahoo rider. They would have our Wahoo helmet, Wahoo bike. They will be swagged out in our Wahoo t-shirts. And the thing that we've realized about creating this resilient, empowered, sustainable community of delivery riders is we're now changing that dynamic of like one man, one bike and the behaviors that most people don't want from their delivery riders. We just have a stronger cadence of how our delivery riders are operating because they're now seeing it as a career, they're part of a community, and they're more empowered. So I've spoken a bit about our fleet. Sorry, has it gone off? There's my tech guy. Okay, brilliant. Can I get a Wahoo? Wahoo! Okay, so I think you mentioned in my intro that we have also entered into Lome. So our big mission is to have a sustainable fleet in every major African city. And we've started with the ECOWAS belt. So we're in Accra, we're going to Lome, and then we're working across to Lagos, and we'll go this other way. But we're also looking for partnerships in other African markets. I think we just recently signed a partnership in Zambia as well. So we will be expanding. But one of the things for us as a great opportunity has been how we could crowd in women into our fleets. So we actually have a program we call Women Delivers. And that's basically, we launched that initially in Togo. And the reason why we did that in Togo to start with, in Lome and not Accra, is more women ride in those markets. So we're also now starting to map naturally where women have the capabilities to ride, as it's just part of their natural culture, but they aren't riding to also generate income. So we've now started to create a channel and a program specifically to support women to enter the logistics space with our e-bikes. But in somewhere like Lome, rather than just doing delivery, the interesting nuance about women couriers is in African markets, if you're sending someone to the shop, you would simply send your daughter or your sister. So what we're finding is that a lot of women are being requested to support with errands. So for our fleet of women in Lome, you see in the morning, they'll deliver bread to your house, they'll pick up your laundry, they'll drop your lunch. So now we have these kind of independent concierge almost services that the ladies in our fleet are providing. And this is something that we're looking to scale up as we go along. The next thing for me was just around R&D. So like I said, there aren't really EVs that have been designed for Africa. So we are also looking at a number of different vehicles. So we've started with the e-bikes. This is what we're scaling up. But we're also looking at how much of different vehicles can we actually localize components. Because the component industry, I think one interesting thing about Ghana being center of the earth, where Greenwich Mean Time meets the equator, from a logistics perspective, we're a really great location to actually set up more of the automotive industry. So we now have Ghanaians from all over the place, like aerospace engineers, drone specialists, powertrain specialists who are working with us. They've gone to universities all over the world, and they're now coming home. So this is one of the important things about also having local industries, is how can we actually create what I call a path to greatness for engineering youth, for youth who really will benefit from jobs in the logistics sector. And so for us, it's about partnerships, not just with Ghanaian universities, but we're also looking to partner with international universities for certain elements of the ecosystem. And I think the thing for us, one of the biggest challenges we have as a country is we are always losing our brightest minds. And you can probably hear from my English accent that I'm an imported Ghanaian. So my parents left Ghana. They lived in the UK for 36 years. And I'm that second generation who's now going back. And it's a movement. There's more of us. This is happening. And so what we really need for this transition to e-mobility to be successful is we need people to recognize Africa as a market, lean in and support the hubs that are on the ground. So I think that is it. I just wanted to end with a bit of a video just to share with you some of the Wahoo vibe, and then I'll be open for questions. Yeah, brilliant. Can we get some sound? So we like to say We are Wahoo, and we are charged with freedom. Thank you so much. Can I go,
Valerie.
Wahoo?
Wahoo!
Wahoo!
Good. That's amazing, Valerie. I remember I was at COP26 and we met with the Ethiopian Minister of Transport, and she was saying that in Africa we still have the chance to avoid the mistakes that you in Europe and North America and China have been making and are making, and I think that what you're doing must be a great contribution to avoiding those mistakes. But I'm not here to talk, so I'm sure that people have questions to Valerie.
Hello, Valerie. I'm Liz from Oxford.
Yeah.
Absolutely inspirational. What you're doing is really, really incredible.
Thank you.
Very, very, very impressive. A couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
First, can you tell us a bit more about where the cargo goes on the bike, what the different storage options are?
Yeah.
And second question, rent-to-own model, fantastic. How long does it take for a rider to own theirs? Do you have differential charging models, whether or not they want to do it part-time, full-time, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
And a couple of the career development pathways that you have for riders once they own their own bike.
Yeah. Okay. So to start with, most of the delivery riders have like a bag that they strap on the back here, but we are also piloting a trailer. So we actually started, one of our earlier designs was like a front-loading, more traditional-looking cargo bike. But we realized on our roads, just the maneuverability wasn't right. So what we realized was people liked the experience of this, but as an accessory where we would see maybe like a farm to market, we are working on a trailer as well to carry and pull bigger loads. I think in terms of the rides to own, so I had mentioned when I was speaking yesterday that the average interest rate, if you were borrowing for a normal asset in Ghana, is around 36% interest. So it's just not feasible to go to a bank. There aren't people lending for you to buy assets in those markets. So this is why we break it down. But we also aren't a financial institution. So we can't differentiate. What we can do is just offer you a payment plan, but we can't charge interest and those kind of things. So at the moment, you can pay over 18 months or 24 months. But what we also now are doing is, because we have data of a rider's earnings, we have data of a rider repaying a fixed asset, and then we also have telematic data of how they're riding. We're actually now able and in discussions with plugging into some digital banks that would actually, after some time, be able to pick up the remaining, or basically factor the contract we have with the riders, and then be able to offer them incentives to pay off quicker. Yeah. It's brilliant.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Sorry, there was one last point that I missed, yeah. And the careers development path. So I'll give an example. Levi, who I mentioned, who's just here. So he joined us as a standard delivery rider. He's now become what we call a rider recruiter. So he earns commission for recruiting other good riders in his community. We have what we call rider champions. So those are like account managers who basically manage cohorts of riders. And then we've now started, we have a network of larger kind of cargo bikes with a box on the back that we're setting up as maintenance hubs at community level. So we're also doing training for riders to be able to also move in as independent maintenance. And those maintenance hubs are also visible to navigate to on our app. Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah.
Please introduce yourself.
Valerie, it's a pleasure to hear you talk. Very inspiring. Thank you. My name is Christian Thalacker. I'm from Luxembourg. We're a financial hub now, but our history was majority agriculture. Okay. And I just did a quick Google search. Yeah. And Ghana, correct me if Google's wrong, is almost 80% manual labor with farming. Do you envision, if you could electrify the tractors, like according to Google, you need 30,000 tractors a year. There are only 2,000 in Ghana every year. Yeah. Could you avoid the mistakes of petroleum agriculture and just go straight to decarbonized solutions?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And when I raised that we've created like an R&D team within Wahoo, is specifically because we know that basically any mobility solution can go electric, but there's no one really thinking of our markets. And I think electric tractors are a huge example. And the only thing that's really limiting us is people don't typically invest in R&D in Africa. So this is how it's been our biggest challenges, even to get the equity to start the business at a level of scale within our markets has been tough. And we're always looking for, like, going back to this ecosystem of believers who know that it's inevitable, who know that in order for the world to really hit our net zero targets, we have to invest in this. And so this is why I'm saying that we're positioning ourselves on the ground for some of those type of projects. We already have people who have the understanding, the expertise, who know these communities. And what we're looking for is people who say, okay, this is a use case I want you to design for and be meaningful about that and to invest in that. Yeah, that's brilliant.
More questions there in the back. Just a moment. Please introduce.
Yes, hi, my name is Alessandra.
Yeah.
I come from Italy. I work for a German company. It's called Cleopa GmbH.
Yeah.
I talked already with Valerie yesterday because I was attending their speech. I want to know more about the pilot line. So which plant you have, what you need to close the loop also on circular economy framework. And yes, know what you need to localize everything in Ghana, in Africa. Thanks.
Yes. That's brilliant. I think it's always interesting speaking from the perspective of an African where all the raw materials comes from our markets, but we don't produce anything that's like finished. I would say even in Ghana, we import toothpicks, we import toilet rolls. So it's a difficult position to be in that kind of market where we know that everything started with us, but we're basically buying it back at 10 times the cost. So localization of components is really important for us. So even little things like the frame. So most cargo bikes, you would see the frames are aluminium. For us, we're making this pivot to steel because we know that we have the supply locally, it's easier to fix. We actually have like a parallel stream that's looking at every single component of the vehicle and understanding how much of it can we localize. And we think we can fully localize around 85% of our bike over the next 24 months. The hardest part is the battery. And I think most of us were all getting our batteries from, like Asian markets. And this is the thing that for us is, how can we get partnerships from an R&D perspective to even test, sodium batteries, lithium batteries, where, it's a different composite in our markets just to see the performance. So we're open to engaging with other research institutes as well. And we have like a whole stream of research projects that we're just continually going to be working on.
Thank you, Valerie. I have a question of my own.
Okay.
The saddle being like it is,
Yeah.
do you have riders using them to offer taxi services?
So actually,
And is that okay?
in Ghana, technically, it's illegal, actually, in Ghana and Nigeria. But the rest of Africa is probably the biggest markets, is using your e-bikes for Okada. So we do have a pedal here if you want somebody to sit on the back. And you can see that these bikes are bigger than the like fat tire bikes you typically see on the roads here in Europe. So it can carry another passenger relatively easily. Yeah.
Here it would be allowed, so here you're fine.
Yeah.
People who want to know even more, in the Carrier magazine, there's a big article about Valerie, and what do we say?
Wahoo!
Thank you very much. And you talked also a bit about women and cycling. And I'll just tell the audience that you will be on stage later today with a couple of other women who are working in cycling to talk about just that. So if you have not had enough of Valerie, and we haven't, you can come and see her again this afternoon after lunch. Thank you, Valerie. Wahoo!